thanks as well to everyone at the Community School of Labor and Urban Studies, New Labor Forum, and the podcast Reinventing Solidarity for helping put this event, this book talk on. Thanks as well to all of the people joining us far and wide for taking an hour out of your day to join me in what I know is going to be a really interesting and compelling conversation with, as Michael mentioned, Sujata Gidla, and we'll be talking about this, her book, Ants Among Elephants, An Untouchable Family and the Making of Modern India, which came out several years ago in 2017. Sujata is a writer whose work has appeared in the New York Times, the op-ed page, the Oxford Indian Anthology of Telugu Dalit Writing, and most recently, she was co-author of a piece with Alan Horn in New Left Review, in a really great and compelling piece called Caste, Race and Class, and hopefully we can put a link to that piece in the chat as well. Although the discussion today will mostly be focused on her book. In addition to her work as a writer, Sujata is also a transit worker and is a subway conductor in New York City, working for the New York City Transit Authority and a member, therefore, of Local 100. So I'm going to ask a bunch of general questions to Sujata, and it's going to be a free-flowing conversation. But I know this is very important to her that we open the conversation up to a broader audience, and especially if there are students at SLU, we would love to get questions. And so as we're talking, please feel free to put questions. Use the Q&A function to pose questions, and hopefully I'll get to as many of them as I can. So with that, I just want to say, welcome, Sujata. Thank you so much for doing this and for writing just a really fantastic and compelling book. I loved reading it, and it was eye-opening in all sorts of different ways. So thank you for that.
Thank you, and it's nice to be here.
Great, great. So I know there are probably people in the audience who have read the book, but there's probably even more who have not. So I thought we'd just start out with some kind of general questions to give them a taste of what is in the book, and then also to encourage them to actually buy it themselves and read it, read the whole thing. So maybe if we could start with just a question about kind of motivations, arguments. So, you know, if not the central argument of the book, what are, you know, some of the questions that are driving the book or motivated you to write it? Why did you write such a fantastic book? I guess is the question. What are the questions that were driving it?
The motivation has always been there ever since I was 9 or 10 years old. I would see the elders, the grown-ups in my family, like standing up and wringing their hands when an upper caste person would pass by. And it used to be very insulting to me that why they should be so servile. But I couldn't ask them, why are we socially inferior despite our parents being highly educated and having respectable jobs and all that stuff. And it's very hard to understand. And somehow I knew that I couldn't ask that question. There is some shame involved in it. So I never asked anybody, why is it that we're treated like this? Why are we being seen as inferiors? And so I was in India until I was 26 years old, but I did not have the courage to ask these questions. And so when I came to America, the circumstances changed because one, anybody in America who's not a South Asian does not understand caste, let alone know about it. If I tell them that like I'm of inferior caste, they don't understand what's involved in that. Some of them would even laugh, whoa, what do you mean? You're like anybody else. Yes, it's true that, for non-South Asians, I'm no different from any other Indian. So talking to these people, it gave me some confidence that I could openly talk about these questions, caste and social status. And the second set of circumstances is witnessing the condition of Black people in America. And there is, unmistakable similarities between Black oppression in America and untouchability in India. They have the same kind of characteristics like, segregated housing. The Jim Crow is gone, but unofficially, the housing still, the discrimination still continues. And then there is this taboo against interracial marriage. All of these things would make any Indian think immediately of untouchability. But then there are some differences also. Black people in America don't hide the fact that they're Blacks unless they don't even have an opportunity to hide that there is that skin color difference. And also they talk openly about racism. They make jokes about racism. They make jokes about being Black. They make jokes about on white people. We in India, the untouchables, don't have that kind of confidence. We still conduct ourselves as Blacks would have conducted themselves in the Jim Crow South. So I wanted to know why they have, went up to that stage and untouchables are still down here. But Black history, it tells you why they're oppressed. They're oppressed because their ancestors were slaves and the stigma of slavery continues. And this history started 400 years back because they were brought from Africa as slaves. But I don't know, and we don't know where we came from, what accounts for our social inferiority. Blacks came from Africa. Where did we come from? And they were slaves. Were we slaves to begin with? So these questions came up, and I thought that I should, look into them. As I said, I got bold enough to ask these questions openly. And so I asked my family, my mother and my uncle, where did we come from? I didn't know anybody before my grandparents' generation. So when they started talking about it, it came as a revelation and extremely interesting stories. And I started writing them down.
Right. So so the book takes the form in some ways of a memoir. It's more of a memoir of your family and less about you, or it's a reflection of your family. And one of the things that I think I appreciated most about it is that it's as much a memoir as it is a history of modern India. That is, through your family or through your family's through your family history, you can see all sorts of tensions and conflicts, the tensions and conflicts that defined, kind of the development of India as a modern state. So one of the questions I wanted to ask that's kind of more general is, what do you think your own family, the history of your family, tells us about the history of modern India? What does it, and especially as a Dalit family, what does it, looking through that perspective, how does it reframe how we think about, India as a modern state?
In the introduction to my book, I wrote that a person's caste is his life and his life is his caste. that's a very, very fundamental identity of an Indian. And when you look at caste, I mean, everything is connected to politics. Politics is nothing but concentrated economics. And that is, it's about class and what class you are in the society and what kind of relationship you have to the means of production. And caste is really, if you look at caste names are same as the words for certain occupations. Like, Kummari is the name of a caste, but it also means potter. Similarly, Kammari is the name of a caste, but it also means blacksmith. So it's kind of like caste is a form of class in feudal agrarian Indian society. And the things that happen to you, the things that you do are influenced by the society around you. Therefore, things that happen to you and things that you do are linked to politics. Circumstances mold people. There is no escaping it. My ideal reader would be of the book would be, would read the book with this view that these stories tell the story of the society in which those people lived. And my ideal reader, I would like them to see what a certain character in the book does and why he does and how it's related to the society, politics, and caste. For example, my grandfather was very strict with my mother. He would say she can't laugh, she can't have men as friends, and she can't go out by herself and all of that stuff. And an unsophisticated reader would say, oh, he's a bad guy. But a sophisticated reader would see where he's coming from. He's trying to be the best according to social, standards. So anything else I can say? I mean, I do say that everything, I'm a Marxist, and being determines, your ideas don't determine being. And things that happen to us are determined by what was happening politically in India, and our reaction to it is also like a political reaction to what is being done to us.
Right. Okay. So this is great, because I think in many ways, I think your book and then also the essay that you recently wrote with Alan Horn kind of make exactly that point, which is, instead of seeing caste or untouchability as a trans-historical category, it's important to place it within a broader political economic context, to see caste in connection with the division of labor in a particular society and in a particular moment of time. And in some cases, caste seems like in the contemporary society, a feudal holdover, or something like a category that existed and had a purpose at one point, but has transformed into something now that is that exists, but exists in a different way. One of the things that you want to add, say, is that kind of.
I want to say that it's a holdover. Yes, that is true from the past. Caste was division of labor and laborers as well, and that suited the agrarian forms of production in India, and it continues. But even now, it still has an economic purpose. Even if it's not agrarian and feudal, it still has a very central significance politically. And this is the case for racism in India, in America also. Blacks were slaves, and that's the slavery plantations required, unskilled laborers that are put to hard labor. That's the kind of labor that was needed, that served a direct economic interest of the plantation owners. But now, and in Jim Crow also, it served a purpose because, it kept Blacks segregated, and it kind of made them inferior, and it kind of extracted nearly free labor from them after having dismantled slavery. And even now, racism serves a purpose, if not directly like a direct, reason like in slavery, but it serves as division of laborers and prevents them from getting together in struggling for their common economic interests. And that's the biggest problem that's in America now, that the labor cannot come together on the basis of racial lines, and white workers identify with the white rulers instead of with Black workers. So it is like, you can say it's the bedrock of American capitalism. And it serves the same purpose, untouchability serves the same purpose in India. One, to divide laborers, and it also works to subject untouchables to super exploitation in agriculture. Agriculture is still not organized on industrial basis. So there is some feudal elements in it. And it's an excuse for the landlords to say, this is your caste and it's your duty to serve us. And so don't demand wages and do what we tell you. And that is the economic interest that still continues in India, and that perpetuates untouchability.
Okay, so this raises all sorts of other questions that I didn't write down. So one of the thoughts that one of the threads through the book is kind of the story of your uncle Satyam Murthy, or Satyam. I'll just say that. And something you just said about the kind of what untouchability as a category does in society or in a particular economy is create divisions among people that prevent collective political action. But there's so many instances in your uncle's life in which the kind of differences in caste disappear momentarily and then reappear. So, so like in the struggle for Indian independence from the British, the kind of caste differences are bracketed momentarily. Or in the rebellion in Telangana, there are moments in which caste differences seem less important than other differences. And
right.
and I think that provides further evidence for what you're saying, and that caste functions in this political economy to divide people. But there's this element in which toward the end of the book, you talk about Satyam's kind of evolution, political evolution, that is his kind of, what would you say, the degree to which caste became more important for him as an organizing principle for much of his political life, whether as part of the Communist Party or the Naxalite movement. Class was his central focus. But toward the end of his life, and in reflection to and reflecting on the differences and problems he saw within the Communist Party, those between castes, his focus transformed. I mean, how do you explain that? Just, why did he? I just thought that was fascinating. Yeah.
So caste is very much prevalent among left parties. In India, we don't call parties like the Democrats left parties. We call parties that call themselves Marxist left parties. In all of the left parties in India, starting from the original Communist Party and its split off Communist Party, Marxist, and even later the Naxalites that came out of it, they all have without exception, they're casteist. And it makes one wonder because, communists, they stand for equality and they stand in the interests of the oppressed, and Dalits are oppressed. So how come there is casteism in these parties? The explanation is that in the Naxalite parties, okay, if you take, for example, the Telangana peasant struggle, the basis were peasants, and peasants are not a homogeneous class. It's a heterogeneous class. There are rich peasants, there are middle class peasants, there are poor peasants, and there are landless peasants. And their interests are, competing with each other. Like the rich peasants want poor peasants to be working for them for cheap, and the landless peasants want some land, and all of this stuff is there. So it's to base one's revolutionary program in peasantry itself is accommodation to caste, because caste, one has to think of it as a factory in which there are different trades, and so these trades are caste. So village economy is dependent on caste divisions. And if you're like basing your political program on the peasants in the villages, then it's automatically seeps into your organization. For example, there are in Telangana armed struggle, there are rich peasants fighting against the zamindars, the aristocratic landowners, and there are poor peasants wanting some more land, and there are Dalits who want some land. So, when there is all of this, the parties succumb to the interests of the middle and rich peasantry at the expense of the poor and the landless peasants. So that is how, the caste seeps in. So caste is actually structural to any communist movement that bases itself on villages and peasantry.
Right. So there's a bunch of questions coming in. I'm going to ask maybe two more and then start collecting questions from the chat. So a lot, as I said before, a lot of the drama that takes place in your book like kind of revolves around your uncle. And I wonder if there's a way you can just tell people who haven't read the book or don't know about your uncle, just kind of who he was. And I mean, there's so many stories you put in the book that are really, I don't know, really evocative. So there's the story about the Toilers Cultural Group, or there's a story about the leper colony that ended up being named after him. So who was your uncle, and why was he important? Because he was.
Yeah. At the outset, I would like to make it clear that although my uncle and myself, we share the same goals to see emancipation of all the oppressed and an egalitarian society, our political programs are different, and I do not subscribe to his politics. That is Maoism. So that's there. But apart from that, he's an extremely interesting character. He became an office bearer in India's Congress Party's youth wing when he was merely 14 years old. And he started his political thinking when he was 11 years old. And by 14, he became a treasurer of the Youth Congress in his area. And at 15, he led a struggle against what is called detention system in schools, which acquired eventually anti-colonial aspect in it. And the thing with him is that there are lots of problems in his life, poverty, and his mother dying of tuberculosis, and his father running away because of poverty, and all of that stuff was there. But he never ever thought of the solution on personal level. he always thought of it on a social level. He didn't say, okay, I'll study hard and become a doctor and then we'll become rich and we won't be poor any longer. He would think that initially he thought that if the British leave India, then we will all be okay. We will all be living in bungalows like white people did. We will all be eating bread with forks and knives like they did, and wipe our mouths with napkins, not with our shoulder,
Right.
So he thought of all of that stuff. And I don't know how he came to view his personal problems as linked to and part of the general social ideas. And he's an extremely charismatic character, very, very, very delicate in his physique, and is very a soft spoken person. And yet he had all this like a violent overthrow of the system, the oppressive system. And I don't know what else to say. He was interested in performance troops, like putting up street plays and singing, and doing ballads through which he would like teach politics, the left politics, the communist politics to the people. And the Communist Party, when it was degenerating, their troop became kind of elitist, and their focus became, eventually step into the movies field, cine field. But he decided it should be the people's theater. And so he collected these people who are the most oppressed of the oppressed. They are the community of untouchables, whose caste duty is to collect the shit of the other people and carry it away to some other place. There's no community more, dehumanized than those people. So he formed a troop with them, and he fought against it, and he led a struggle against eviction of lepers, migrant lepers. Who he was like going to college, and he saw this bulldozer coming, and he threw his books aside and stood in front of the bulldozer. So they came to call their colony Satyamurti Colony, when in his name. And they say that he's like a very clever, what do you call it? Tactician, strategist in guerrilla warfare. I don't know how he became that. And he writes poetry. He wrote poetry that is like extremely beautiful, that talks about moonlight and the streams and the flowers and the nice breeze, but it combines with these violent aspects of overthrowing the system and establishing an egalitarian society. When he became a Dalit poet, he took the mythologies, Hindu mythologies, and turned them on their heads. The Hindu mythologies are always justifying, caste oppression. And so he turned it against them. And he says that this unfolding history is the history of the filthy people, the most unsacred people, I don't know. I mean, somebody should translate his poems. Like, I'm very moronic when it comes to poetry, but the only poetry that moves me is Sri Sri's poetry and Sivasagar, which is my uncle's poetry.
Excellent. Well, there are questions flooding in, so I'm going to stop talking or stop asking questions myself and go to some of the questions that are appearing in the chat. Okay, so the first question that came in, this is Anu Biswas, who's a SLU student, was wondering how useful the idea of Pan-Dalit identity and solidarity is for you. It can seem from observing elections in UP like there's a lot of identifying with one's own specific caste that may or may not get in the way of a larger Pan-Dalit solidarity. So I guess the question is about Pan-Dalit solidarity and politics. And
Mhm.
let's combine it with another question. Let's see. Um, are there particular aspects of your uncle's politics that continue to influence current anti-caste activism? So the questions, yeah.
Uh, you're saying that pan-Dalit politics, are they effective or not? Is that what you're asking?
I guess the idea is how useful the idea of pan-Dalit identity and solidarity are for you.
There is this problem in Indian communist movement where the communists refuse to uh, to to recognize the reality of caste, and their explanation is that Marx never talked about caste; he talked about class only. So we should not talk about caste, and caste oppression will automatically go away once we, achieve the class struggle, success of the class struggle. And that is not how it is in India. Caste oppression is a very big reality, and caste oppression is the central question of Indian society. And so Dalits, it's communist parties, because of their egalitarian ideas, Dalits are naturally attracted to those parties, but they're disappointed and disillusioned because the communist parties are not taking up the question of the caste and untouchability. So untouchables became, a separate, and now we have Dalit movement starting in 1980s after brutal massacres of untouchables in various parts of India. But the problem with them is that they kind of became the central thing for them. What became of them is that they became anti-communist, they became anti-Marxist, and they don't even tolerate the talk of working class struggles. And that's a big problem with them. And my uncle, what he sought to do was to combine Marxism and class struggle with caste struggle and Ambedkarism. Ambedkar was the undisputed leader of the untouchables in India, who was a contemporary of Hindu and visceral enemy of Gandhi. So he tries to combine Marxism and Ambedkarism, but I think it's wrong because although Ambedkar was, he devoted his life to untouchables and all that stuff, but he always said that the best possible society is capitalism. And he rejected Marxism. And so it's not, they're mutually exclusive. Marxism, class struggle, and Ambedkarism are mutually exclusive. And Ambedkar's ideas are that we should take care of, we should ask for parliamentary reforms to better the condition of the Dalits. So even though he did try to combine it, I don't think it would work. And I think that pan-Dalit is not feasible because recently I went to Punjab to talk with the family of a victim of lynching. And they were so surprised that somebody from South India would come and talk to them, which wasn't anything strange to me. For them, like, I'm a Dalit, but I came from South India, and why would you come to talk to us? What commonness do we have? So Dalits are there everywhere, but they don't really identify with Dalits from other parts of the country. And that's one thing. And then the Dalit politics have degenerated into identity politics, and that made them elect this Dalit party called BSP. And BSP came to power because of the support of the Dalits, but all it did was, work for the interests of the ruling class. And it continued under its rule. It continued the bulldozing of untouchable colonies and all of that stuff. But now BSP has completely lost its credibility, and it's no wonder that it did. And in India, there is no struggle that can succeed without taking up caste question. Like if workers want to struggle for their economic interests without taking up the caste question, they cannot win their struggle, because there's an example in 1928. There was a huge textile industry workers strike in 1928, and it was a huge militant strike, and it also was anti-colonial, but it did not succeed because the Dalits crossed the picket lines. And they crossed the picket lines because the working class, the trade unions did not take up the Dalit question, and Dalits found it, why should we support this strike? So working class would never succeed in their struggles without taking up the caste, and untouchables cannot succeed without the help of the working class, because the working class is the one that has the social power to run the society. So they are mutually dependent, and they should recognize that.
I think you've answered, in that answer, you've answered a number of other questions that have already just been posed. So this one I think is directly, your answer is directly in response to the question of how caste discrimination is undermined left political movements in India, and its contribution to the right-wing lurch in Indian politics. And I think that what you were just saying speaks to that. There's a number of questions about gendered violence against Dalit women, and that its role in kind of maintaining the caste hierarchy. And then there's also a set of questions on how caste plays out among the Indian diaspora in North America, and your thoughts on that.
Okay, the first question is sexual violence against Dalit women, and we'll talk about that. You can see that women always occupy the secondary position, anywhere in the world, even in the communist, so-called communist societies like China or the former USSR, all of that stuff. Women are still not equal to men. That was because there is property, and the property is passed from through male lineage. So that exists as long as there is private property. But there is the struggles of women in the West are typically like equality at work, and opportunities for promotions, and sexual harassment at work, and these kind of things. But in India, there is this extra aspect of extreme women's oppression in India. They're not allowed to choose their own mates. And what explains this extra oppression of women in India, in South Asia, is caste. Caste is why South Asian women are more oppressed, way more oppressed than women in the West, because it's inextricably linked with caste. Caste is division of laborers, and if the laborers, if this division disappears, then the castes disappear. And in order to keep the castes, demarcated clearly, inter-caste marriages are forbidden. If a woman marries from a different caste, then what will the offspring be? Will it be, upper caste or lower caste? And that was the problem even in Jim Crow, that the interracial marriages were forbidden. It was a law. And the reason is that to maintain the integrity of caste, you have to maintain, endogamy. You have to marry only within your group. And so this aspect, in order to prevent women from choosing their mates, is the basis for the brutal oppression of women in India. So a high value is placed on the sexual chastity of women. This is the highest honor, and her chastity determines the honor of the family, the honor of their caste, the honor of their village, and all of that. It's a huge deal. So in India, the chastity of women has very high value. So if you want to insult somebody, if you want to hurt somebody really bad, you will take the most valuable thing from them. And so that means that sexual violation of the women of the rival group. So sexual violence is a form of punishment, political punishment against people. So Dalit women are most vulnerable because any resistance from the Dalits, it's retaliated, and the brunt of it is borne by the Dalit women. If the man asks for wages and the landlord doesn't like his audacity, he will send people to rape his women, because the women's chastity has the highest value, and violating it is the most hurtful thing for the family. So rape is used as political violence. In Kashmir, the occupying Indian military was told to rape women, Kashmiri women, and that's what they do in Northeast, where they're struggling for self-determination and autonomy.
So there's a number of questions about just generally about the caste system and its connection to Hindu religion and kind of the relationship between the two. There's also a number of questions that kind of focus on the parallels that you drew early on between the relationship between Black Americans in the US, and one of those questions is about passing. That is, at least in the US context. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I can't pass, but there are people who are phenotypically able to pass. And so is that one of the questions is that a reality for is that true for Dalits passing as?
Very much. I am an example of that, because a typical Dalit is supposed to be landless and a laborer and living in segregated colonies and be poor and wear loincloths instead of proper clothes. This is the condition of a typical Dalit, which is like being Black, having Black skin color. So all of these things, being poor, being landless, being living in a segregated colony and having certain kind of last names, these are all markers for untouchables, just as the skin color is for Black people. And if the skin color of Black people is like, if they pass for white person, they are able to pass. And having white skin and white features is what I am, because I'm not poor, I'm educated, I can speak English, I don't live in a village working as a land laborer. So all of this enabled me, there is a possibility for me to pass. And this is the situation that educated Dalits like me face. They're like everybody else, but then they're inferior for no reason. And so we face the additional problem of, like talking about us with other people. Like we can't talk about, if we talk about our lives, we will have to say, oh, we eat beef, or we'll say we're Christians, or we'll say so-and-so are the tradition, are the customs in our marriage. These all tell my caste. And so if I tell my stories to anybody, they will immediately know that I am from an untouchable caste. So we have to keep quiet. We cannot talk about ourselves. And if people ask us what, then we are at loss to say what we are. Either should we lie that we're Brahmins, or should we tell them the truth? If you tell them the truth, you risk being ridiculed and harassed and even driven to suicide, as happens very often in universities. For example, in the University of Hyderabad, there is one untouchable suicide every year. And they're harassed because they're known as untouchables, because they have these surnames and they're beneficiary of scholarships and the affirmative action. These all tell others that they're untouchables. And if you don't tell them, what they will try to find by other means. They will ask like somebody from your village or from your town, or they will ask questions like, what are your customs in your weddings and things like that. So in either case, you cannot talk about your caste, and it's a thing that is faced by Dalits like me. And there is a book that came after my book, which is called Coming Out as Dalit. This woman pretended to be a Brahmin all her life. And all her friends, they even changed their surname. All her life, she told everybody, either directly or implying that she's a Brahmin. And suddenly she came out as a Dalit. And it came to her just as it happened to me here, coming to America, seeing Black people and their struggles and their confidence and what they achieved. And she thought it's not necessary to hide anymore. Yeah, that happens to educated Dalits. And the worst thing that we fear is being outed. Being outed is what we really fear. And it's like they consider you Brahmins, and when it comes out, the way their attitude changes is like unbearable to us, And that happened in America in, I don't know, San Francisco or somewhere, in Cisco, the Brahmin team leader in IT, he kept threatening the untouchable that he would out him and he would deny him promotion opportunities, pay rises, and all of that stuff. So this outing is a big thing, and it is used as a weapon against us.
Right.
My sister's coworkers will say, the Indian coworkers will say, oh, they're waiting for a conference, sitting around a table, and this woman says, oh, we still have time. Why don't we tell what caste we belong to? And they can tell it very proudly. We are Brahmins, we are Kamma, we are Reddy, we are this and that. And her intent is to shame my sister. If my sister says that she's some other caste, and she would say, aren't you an untouchable? And if she doesn't say, if she doesn't lie and she says that she's an untouchable, yeah, they're untouchable, So this thing is a mortal shame for us to be outed and to have to tell people that we're untouchables, actually, even though we are educated.
So this is, as I expected, there's so many things I would like to talk to you about, and there are many questions that I didn't get to in the chat, but we only have 4 more minutes, and I thought I would.
I mean, if you don't mind, I can talk.
Okay. Michael will probably be like, write me and say, tell me what to do. But I want to plug the latest thing you wrote, which I had a chance to read last night, the caste, race, and class piece, which is your reflection on this book, the Isabel Wilkerson book on caste, and in many ways a critique of parts of it, but in some ways an endorsement of other parts. It's a complex argument I think you put forward about the limits of bringing of transporting or translating a caste kind of framework to the position of Black Americans in the US. Maybe if you could just briefly talk a bit about kind of why you wrote this, kind of the goals of it and its connection to the book, because I think it builds on something that you kind of end with at the end of the book. So if you could just plug that new Left Review
Okay.
article, because it's
So
great.
the name of the book is Caste, and Indian Untouchables, we are the prototype of caste system. So we do have to comment on such a book that calls itself Caste. In any case, the endorsement is only one thing, that she recognizes racial oppression as caste oppression. The underlying oppression is caste oppression, and it is manifested as racial oppression. So racism is just a marker, but the basis is caste. And what makes something a caste? I mean, there are oppressed groups like Hispanics and immigrants and all that stuff, Mexicans, but their oppression is not same as caste oppression. It's the Black oppression that is specifically caste oppression. And according to her, there are 8 things that makes this a caste oppression. One, the religious endorsement of the oppression. Second is prevention of interracial marriage and social isolation, segregated thing, and inferior, superior, and all of that stuff. She chose these 8 things, and she says that all caste societies have these 8 characters, which is actually not, she's factually incorrect, because only Hindu caste system has religious endorsement to caste oppression. The slavery and racism are not, in the Bible, as much as they tried to say that, Noah, his son, and Ham, and all that stuff, but it didn't stick. And it's the same with the Jews and in Nazi Germany. So, so some of the characteristics that she said that makes caste are really not there in all of them. And the second thing is, she chose this set of things, and she says that this is why it's caste, but she doesn't explain why these characteristics make it a caste. But why should these characteristics make some group a caste? So she took a bunch of symptoms, and she says that this is caste, but she doesn't explain why these symptoms, where are they coming from? So that's the biggest problem with her. And her solution, her explanation is that it's very silly, that it's the desire of white people to be superior to some other group and maintain it, unearned superiority, so this desire that, we need to be superior to someone, this trumps their economic interests. Like white workers don't unite with Black workers because they feel superior, but they will gain by united struggle. But even that won't stop them from being racist, because she says that the poor whites like to be superior. That's the silliest explanation ever. And it's very, very unmaterialistic and un-Marxist. And so the most disgusting thing about this book is that she blames poor whites for racism. But so it all comes from poor whites' minds. But she ignores the fact that the ruling class in Jim Crow made specific rules to maintain racial segregation and to maintain Black people as inferior. There are these laws. These laws come at the behest of the ruling class, the tiny ruling class. So it's really the tiny white ruling class that benefits materially from the maintenance of racial oppression. But she blames it on poor white people. It's very elitist. And the second, the final thing is that just as she says that racism comes out of the minds of the poor whites, the solution also lies in the minds of the poor white people. They have to enlighten themselves that, racism is bad and all of that stuff. If you leave this to individual people to reform themselves, there is really no hope that there will ever be Black emancipation. The only thing to do is that you have to look at Black oppression as having an economic interest, underlying economic interest that is benefiting somebody, and she's not recognizing that. And so as Marxists, we say that there is a material basis, economic basis for the racial oppression, and removing that material basis is the only way to smash racial oppression. And so Wilkerson's book, firstly, it's vague about why this oppression is called caste, and she doesn't explain why these symptoms, make them, inferior, superior. And then she blames it on white people, and she says that there is no hope for, emancipation of Blacks because white people won't change their minds. These are all the drawbacks of the book, and it's very elitist and very classist and very, very wrong. The only thing that's correct about this book is identifying racism as a caste oppression.
Right. Okay. So this is, I encourage people to find it on, hopefully we can put a link to it in the chat. And then also to go out and buy the book, because it's
very easy to read.
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
ton of people who said that they read it in 6 hours, or they read it while waiting in terrific traffic jam in Bangalore. So they started enjoying traffic jams because they could read the book, they said. So it's very easy and very kind of entertaining also to read. So you must read it.
Yes, please. And so with that, I don't want to get Michael or anyone else in trouble. I will call it, and I apologize to people whose questions I didn't get to. Hopefully there's a record of the chat that we can send to Sujata, because there were people in the chat who said, well, I'm working with the Dalit community in X, Y, and Z, and I'd like to contact you. So it will be, we'd like to connect you with people who are working on issues that are relevant to your writing and
One
work.
thing is that, like, even the Indian untouchables are the prototype and Blacks came after them, but their struggles and their development, all of that, they're like decades ahead of what untouchables were able to achieve. And just like we take cues, like we have Dalit Panthers, like Black Panthers and all of that stuff, we also take cues from Black misleaders. So there are now a lot of Dalit misleaders and Dalits, with vested interests. So you have to be aware of it.
Okay. Well, again, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about your great book. And I really enjoyed it, and I encourage everyone to get a copy. So thanks again, and thanks to everyone who was able to join in live, and later for those people who are listening via the podcast. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I really enjoy talking to students.
Cool. All right.